we'll figure. We'll see. We'll test
Yeah.
these waters. We'll see how much you know about marketing and
I know.
this
Now
sort
I'm
of stuff.
nervous. I'm like, fuck, do I
Yeah.
know? do I even know what I'm doing? Let's do it.
Welcome to the podcast, Mona.
Thank you for having me.
That's good. I mean, we've kind of it's been kind of a long time coming. We said we'd do this for a while back.
Yeah. I think we had like this for a month on schedule
Yeah,
about, yeah,
definitely for a month. But then trying to lock you in for actually recording was a challenge in itself because
I
you're
know,
a
right?
busy person, you know. And,
Yeah. It was just the timing because with Vanilla's release, especially like pre-Vanilla,
yeah,
like even my friends, like my physical friends that live in New York, were like, "Hey, do you want to hang out?" And I'd be like, "Can't. I'm editing. I'm doing formatting. I'm et cetera, et cetera." Like I would come home. You could ask my roommates. I would come home and immediately go into my room, and like no one could talk to me because I had all
disappear.
this stuff to do.
Yeah, completely just
Yeah,
hiding. I mean, just consume your life. That's what creating stuff does.
yeah,
But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
yeah.
Not necessarily. So for the people listening, because I tend to be terrible at introducing people, can you tell them who you are and what you do to
Sure.
start us
My
off?
name's Mona Kabbani. I'm morality and horror on like Instagram and other media. I'm a horror writer, specifically in psychological horror, and I've released two publications so far, one a novella and one a novel. Working on some other things, but yeah, primarily horror stories in the psychological sect.
And as we say, you're based out in there in New York. Is it?
I live in New York City,
You
my
originally from
favorite
New
city.
York, or
No, I was actually born in Lebanon and then moved to New Jersey. And then I lived in Miami for 4 years and I hated the weather. So I ran back to the Northeast. So now I
that's
live in
such
New
a
York.
random interlude, like
I know, right?
Lebanon, New Jersey. But we're gonna drop over to Miami just for
I know.
just a few years. Just
I know. I'll literally message my friends sometimes from Florida and I'll be looking at like media from Florida, which is like insane. Like
yeah,
Florida man is such a real thing. And I'll be like, I can't believe I lived in Miami for 4 years because I do not feel it. I feel very much a New Yorker.
yeah. It's too warm. I could never deal with that
It's
that
very,
temperature. I mean,
yeah,
it gets too warm in England in like the summer, and I've already thought about giving up and just moving to Alaska because
I know.
it's dangerous times.
I
But
feel
yeah, I
you.
mean, I discovered you through your. I think I discovered you through Instagram. I
That's
feel
where
like I
most people
discovered
do.
you through Instagram because I go through stages of finding guests
Hmm.
where I don't know, like I become fixated on topics. And every so often, I'm like, oh, I'll find a lot of musicians, and I'll see if we can get musicians. But with you, I think I came across you when I was in like a real bookstagram like drive
Yeah.
of trying to get into that kind of thing. Because you do, as you say, you obviously write yourself, but you also
Mhm.
review on like a weekly basis. Is it weekly?
I review like 2 times a week sometimes. It depends on my
Jesus,
workload, but sometimes even three. I read a
how do you
lot.
read that much?
I don't know. I get that question so much. I think because I have two different books at the same time and one will be like on my phone and then the other's physical. So I'm like if I'm on the subway, if I'm going to the bathroom, like I'm constantly reading on my phone and then like when I'm in the morning or sitting down, I'll read like a physical book. I don't know. I really like reading and it's such a
Do you do
great
anything else? Like,
dude, I know. That's what I was saying about like you being like, oh, if you have like a topic you want to talk about,
yeah,
I'm like, I literally only like read and write. Like it's pathetic, but that's like my favorite thing to do. So that's what I'm gonna do. So
I mean
yeah,
that's not pathetic. That's having passion. That's
yeah, yeah. That was a poor word for it, but it's definitely like an obsessive. I don't know. I just really like reading, and it's also a great like practice, free practice, basically for kind of honing in on my own writing.
yeah.
You know.
I do. I think I've spoken to a few writers who say the main thing they advise new writers to do is to read more
Yeah.
and just kind of dive into as many texts as possible. But diving into 2 books a week seems just
Yeah,
the
it's a
thought
lot.
of it just makes me tired like already.
Yeah. I have like reading slumps sometimes where even
Yeah.
I'm exhausted and I'm just like I can't focus on reading, but for the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do read a lot. No, I get that a lot. That reaction.
I mean, surely I mean, it's not all horror.
No.
No,
It goes
you do
through
have range.
I'll typically have like one of the two books I'm reading is kind of in the horror realm just because for like the content on my Instagram,
Hmm.
I like to be able to do reviews and I really only review horror books on there. But like right now I'm reading They All Died Screaming by Triana, which is like very grungy horror. And then I'm also reading Queen of Shadows, which is like that YA fantasy, like young adult thing. So it's very two different realms of stories that I'm in right now. But
the contrast between those two titles is
you can't, sometimes
large.
you can't have too much horror. It's just like, whew.
I mean, that is a question. Can you have too much horror?
I think it depends the type, because this like Triana book I'm reading right now is like very dark, and I think if I was reading two of the same type of horror right now, I'd be like very dark myself. You gotta like balance it with something, I think, maybe.
I mean, I guess that's the question. I mean, do you find that it affects you, like reading kind of those things? Because I'm a person who consume content excessively, not necessarily just books, but it never carries over into my regular life. It's never like affected me that way.
I think in the moment when I'm reading, and obviously the goal of a writer is to incite like emotion in someone. So like I will get anxiety in the moment reading, and then maybe after I put the book down, that carries on for like 10 minutes afterward, but it's not an excessive thing. Sometimes if a story has a really dark ending that is very like sucker punch into your own life, that could affect me for like a day or two. But I think it really depends on like the type of horror and how relatable it is to like you as an individual person.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
A lot of sense indeed. I was having a read because I like to do a little bit of research about people. I asked to come talk for an hour because that's only the right thing to do, right?
Right.
Having a read kind of like your previous interviews and why you choose kind of morality horror versus, let's say, gore horror is kind of like a genre. And I thought it was really interesting that you kind of made that point of the horror industry does tend to be very focused on gore and blood and what it can get out with like that shock value, whereas diving into morality stuff, people tend to shy away from. And I thought it was kind of, I was curious if over time that's something you developed, or if that's something which you've always done, like always shied slightly away from that and gone more for the psychological.
I think throughout my life, I was very into consuming horror movies that had a lot of gore, and I did like that shock value, and I liked that almost like art with prosthetics and whatnot in terms of like movie mediums. I think when I decided to write horror, I realized that like just my concept of like a literature medium like needs to include a bit more morality, just to incite more of a reaction in a reader. And I noticed that with a lot of my reviews too, people will be like, this is horror, but it's a different type of horror than what you're used to because it's the horror of life, which is kind of my favorite type, because like gore horror I think is comfortable because you're like, that's so distant from me.
Such an odd phrase to say. Gore horror is comfortable.
It kind of is, because it's like you don't experience something like that every day, right? So it's more so like it feels distant enough from you. I would hope so, yeah. It feels distant enough from you that you're not, I guess, absorbing it fully, whereas horror, that's a little bit more relatable to your life. Like if I take a concept like struggling relationships or something, right, which I think a lot of people have like in the past had like maybe a bad relationship or a bad friendship of sorts, and then I add a horror aspect to that, and then I kind of like twist it. I think that's way more psychologically screwing with the reader than if I was just like, here's some people and then like here's a bunch of blood and enjoy, which I think is comfortable. I don't know.
I mean, that's definitely the title of this podcast now. There's a bunch of people, here's some blood, enjoy. Featuring Mona. No, I do think that's interesting. I think it is an important point, especially kind of when I speak to artists. It's something which I tend to do within my own work. Like I do kind of abstract stuff, but I tend to always try and put something which is relatable within the work I do, because I feel like you have to have that connection when you visibly see something. You can't. It's harder to look at something which is completely abstract and connect with it. So you have to have that little. Is it the uncanny?
Yeah.
Level to it.
Right.
If that makes any sense. Yeah.
No, it does for sure. Yeah. And I think even like another nice thing about writing and like creating like characters, right? So you can have like a range of characters in a story, and if you make them like everyday character. Like I base a lot of my characters off people I know, like their
Mhm.
personalities and stuff, which is why they seem more lifelike than if I kind of just tried to fabricate someone out of thin air, right? But I think different people, then you give a chance for different people to have a different relationship with each character, and then sometimes it can like hit home for some people that they might behave in the same way as that character, and then that makes it all the more uncanny for them.
Yeah,
So yeah.
definitely. Your audio's gone slightly quiet.
Has it really? How bad?
No, like I don't know why. It just kind of dropped off. Maybe it's just my end. Hang on.
Were you able to hear me?
Okay, I'm able to hear
It's
you.
just quiet.
It's just quiet. Hang on. I'll
Is it
turn
still
my
quiet?
computer audio up. Dragon.
Hello?
There we go. Okay.
Okay,
Maybe, I
cool.
don't know what that is. It's fine. I can fix it. Just a brief interlude on the podcast. Sorry. I mean, so kind of speaking on that topic, I'm curious. I did a little bit of reading about your latest book, which obviously came out recently, called Vanilla. I believe that's right. Definitely haven't got those in the wrong order because I was also looking at the bell jar, thinking I'm not going to get this the wrong way around. What is Vanilla about?
So Vanilla is about basically a girl who lives in a concrete room, and it's the only thing that she remembers since she was young. She doesn't remember anything before because she was brought in basically when she was like a year old. And someone who comes in and takes care of her, she calls him daddy, and he's like, and like he, loves her as like a father figure and all of that, and takes care of her, but also tells her that the outside of the room is filled with all these creatures and like monsters that will immediately attack her if she ever leaves. So he like instills this fear in her, so then that way he can kind of keep her in the room. And then one day something happens and he has to let her go out into the world. So it's about like her experience being someone that was like very happy in their small world, just this concrete room with just one person that they relied on for like love and affection and care. And then all of a sudden that world opening up into something that horrified them for all their life, and kind of discovering and trying to navigate through that.
Which sounds intense.
Yeah. And the whole, like, I try to like pick kind of a moral theme for every book that I write, even if maybe sometimes they overlap between books or whatnot. So this one's kind of the difference between love and possession. And like, if you think that someone can love you while also trying to like keep possession over you, and if that's like true form of love and stuff like that. So I like posing like those kind of questions.
Yeah, that's interesting that you kind of define your books by those kind of like those aspects rather than necessarily like a structure aspect or how you would see a character. This one's all one type of character, this one's all other type of character, and rather just do it as like an overarching vague theme, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, not vague because you defined it.
Right. I think it helps me with like writing and keeping the emotion and the message consistent throughout the entire story if I have that like question posed to myself beforehand, and then I like keep it in mind as I'm like structuring and writing these characters, because I want to like have everything be supportive of that question. So it's like I just like being able to be like, okay, I'm going to write a story that's about this moral concept, and then that way I can like string it through everything and it feels much more like structured to me, at least.
Yeah. That's quite a structured way of approaching work, really.
Mm-hmm.
Have you always worked like that?
Not like when I first ever started writing. I mean, when I started writing when I was a kid, and I was just like, I feel like writing a story about like a troubled girl. I don't know. So but then, when I got more serious and like figured out what I wanted to do with my work, when it became to publishing and actually having people purchase and read and, find my stuff worthwhile, I like thought about what I would want in a book and like the types of books that I read that I like more. And I was like, okay, I like these with moral ambiguity and whatnot. So let me structure it more like that. And then I think for me, like moral concepts come up first, and then from that, characters and the possible story to like show that. So it's kind of just happenstance. It's not so much that I was like, for sure I have to have this question first. It's just like that's like the natural way for me to write now.
Yeah, that's interesting because I know I've spoken to other writers. I think I had Dan Wilcox, a friend of mine who was on. He's very formalized in how he writes. Like sets himself time limits, sets word limits, and really like fully structures. Whereas I know when other artists which I know, who Richard Downey is a friend of mine, he just completely dives in like the story goes where it goes, and figure out that as you go along, and then there's a story at the end of it. So it's kind of like you now found like a nice balance, I guess, between that, which is it's interesting. I think from a creative point of view, to me.
Yeah, I think my method is like, so I'll have the question,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll have a good idea of like the cast I want for the story. I'll know how I want it to begin, and then I'll know how I want it to end in the sense of hitting my point home. And then I just like go for it. Like, I don't know what anything that's going to happen in the middle. I don't know. Like, I have a vague idea of the ending. I'm just like, as long as this element happens, so that way I drive that point home, it's okay. I'm not like super structured. Like I cannot do outlines. Like, I think anyone that does outlines has like a very genius working brain, because I'm just like, I don't understand how you're able to like
I honestly thought
see
you
that.
were gonna like insult people. Then I thought you would just be like, anyone who does outlines is absolutely insane.
No. I think it's a very like, my editor Spencer does outlines, and I'm just like that's so smart. I don't know how you can properly plot. My brain is just like, I don't know. We're just gonna go and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And it's just too different. There's no wrong way at all ever to like writing or any preference of that sort. It's just like a different way that the brain works. And I think that like people that can do outlines are like, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't think I could ever structure an outline. My brain can't see that far ahead.
People who can plan like that are kind of a little bit scary, I find.
Right? Well, psycho.
It's kind of like people who work in marketing or like accountancy. I kind of look at them like, I don't really know what to do with you. How to handle that situation. But that kind of brings us on nicely to the topic, despite you saying you didn't have a topic, which I also found hilarious, because the amount of people I ask who are creatives and just say, you get to pick the topic, and automatically draw a blank.
Yeah.
Like, just can't do it. And but I found going through your kind of Instagram, like you're saying, with you marketing your new book and how you approach marketing, kind of fully get involved with it, is like a nice rounded topic. Because I read on your might have been an interview, or it might have been on your website, that you very much approached morality horror as a brand aspect, like rather than kind of like a creative like thing. Obviously it is a creative thing, but you kind of said to yourself early on, this needs to be branded.
Yeah.
And I thought that was quite different to like how most people get started with these things.
Yeah, I think for me, because I went to business school for college, so like I guess my approach was just my approach was just very like, as a business. I mean, because technically every single author is in and of themselves their an own business, and the brand is themselves, right? So to like get someone to buy a product or invest in your work, they have to like you and your mission and like your overall vibe, and they have to like relate with you and connect with you and whatnot. So I did approach it more like a brand, and then that way, even for myself, I could better handle the idea. It felt more structured as just treating it like a brand and a business, and then that way I could think of it more like, okay, what would I do like for a business? Let me apply that to this, and it's worked out like pretty well.
I do feel like I need to ask, why did you go to business school?
I mean, yeah, I didn't know I wanted to like write until literally like junior year of college. So going into high school, into college, I went to I did marketing and
how old you'd be at that point. How old would you
be? I was 20.
20. Okay, sorry, I'm having to match it with the UK like things in my head. Karen.
Yeah, so I'm 24 now. So like I've really only like started taking this seriously for like 4 years. I always liked writing, like it was my favorite medium, and reading and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I guess even like realizing that there was a whole realm of self-publishing, I didn't process until like senior year of college, right? So like junior year, I was like, all right, maybe I could do like a traditional publishing contract. Let me attempt for this. I started writing vanilla. And then, senior year, I did NaNoWriMo. And then through that, which is National Novel Writing Month, it's like when you write for anyone that doesn't know, it's when you write 50,000 words in 30 days, which is a book. So that opened up like a whole realm of realizing that you could do self-publishing. And then I was like, oh, wow, I could do this all like myself, instead of having to go through like the anxiety of, querying and finding an agent, which is like great for anyone who's able to do that. Like, kudos to you. I need to get on that one day. But being like
because you've been doing great.
Yeah, I know. That's another thing too. I'm like, I'm kind of enjoying this whole process. So I'm like, I don't know if I'd ever really, I'd rather kind of like blow up and keep everything self-published and like just, if I can like get a little bit bigger and like stay self-published, because traditional publishing, like they have marketing means that are like unmatched because they have reach. So it's like, if I can grasp that reach self-published wise, I would absolutely stay in self-publishing. It's just a little bit more work, hence the whole like marketing thing of this being the topic of discussion, because it's a lot. Like, you're not only a writer, you're your own business person, you're your own agent, you're your own marketer. It's crazy. So then I found like the self-publishing realm through that, and then I was like, okay, well, if I'm approaching this, because I obviously want to sell the book one day, if I'm approaching this, how do I kind of get other people to like also be into my work and want to like eventually buy a book? And I went through like Patreon and Wattpad, and then I realized that wasn't the best way to get reach. So then I found Instagram, and that really just worked out super well.
Instagram I found it quite a strange one in terms of kind of getting used to it as an idea. I think like with you saying, like you kind of come to a point where you suddenly realize that you can develop a brand which is essentially you. Like a brand doesn't necessarily have to be detached from your personality or anything like that. People are very willing to invest in just your life, and that's like Instagram definitely just kind of marketed itself along those lines and really rushed that idea of coming out.
I think the other nice thing, especially with Instagram, is there's such a concentrated community of different like bookstagram things. So like we have the horror bookstagram community, and they're all so great and like interconnected and always wanting to like support and uplift other people. So it was like very easy, like for once you figure out your own brand and get that, to like also interact with other people in the community and kind of exchange that support. And they're all very great about it. It doesn't feel like exclusive and you're trying to wedge yourself into this community that doesn't want you, or what. It's very like inclusive and uplifting. So that's another nice thing, because when you're like marketing and branding yourself, like I think the first step in doing any sort of marketing for yourself is like realizing that it's a process of bravery, because you're putting yourself out there and you're trying to convince people that you get imposter syndrome, and it's like, am I good enough for anyone to even like why do I think, like what kind of egoism do I have that I'm like here, I'm this good that you should follow me and like buy my stuff, so that's what's really nice about that community too, is because you're entering a realm where you're kind of shaky and nervous and you have to put yourself out there, but everyone's so supportive and encouraging that you don't feel as much fear, because you can't really fuck up. They're all just so nice.
It's a strange one as well, because that is I think this is a conversation I have with most artists, of that whole idea of marketing yourself. And I know I fight it constantly. I do the most I can to not market myself. That's like my be all and end all. If I can remove me from a conversation about me, I'll do it. Like, it's the best I can do. But I had a conversation recently with a couple of artists who were saying just that by being an artist, you already have an ego, because you're saying to the world on what level the world needs to pay attention to the work I create. Who am I to think that I can write? Who am I to think I can go out and illustrate something and do all these kinds of things? And yet, as soon as we get it out into the world, we suddenly become really insecure.
Yeah.
And suddenly just drop back and say, no, I can't do that.
I know. And imposter syndrome and like doubt are such a disease in creative communities. It's insane. Like, especially doubt. Like, I know that a lot of writers, as even they're writing, it's like you get started on an idea and you're so engrossed and obsessed with it, but because you're spending such a long time creating the artwork, not that it becomes boring, but maybe like mundane or whatnot, that you begin to like doubt yourself, and you're like, is this even like, who would I dare bore with this content that I'm like, you know what I'm saying? So it's really like a feat of overcoming that as well. Like even Vanilla, and I mean that was a 2-year project, right? So like, imagine the ups and downs of just being like, this is the greatest thing known to man, and then being like, this is absolute garbage, like how dare I put this out into the world, like who do I think I am, right? So
it really comes to the end of it and you look back and you go, yeah, but I can see all the mistakes. Like, I can see the nights I spent and the characters and chapters I threw away to get to this end point, and no, everyone's going to notice that, and then really nobody's going to notice that. They're just going to read
No, yeah. And people aren't like you're your own biggest self-critic, right? So it's like people are always so, and that's what I like about the community too, is all the, even like the readers, I'm not even talking about like the writers themselves, but just like the Bookstagram reviewers and stuff, they're all so like excited for these new concepts and these new writers, and they're not like trying to be New York Times critic of like tearing your work apart or anything. They're just like, deliver us a good story with good characters and show that you cared about the publishing process, and they like love it. So it's important to like get, and I feel so bad for anyone that like doesn't put their stuff out there because of they let that doubt take over, because you don't realize how, even if it's just like one or two people that you're changing their life because they liked the work so much, like it's worth it, so it's really unfortunate, but it's such like a struggle to fight that doubt as a creative.
It's interesting as well, like you mentioned, like the whole idea of kind of New York Times critics and bigger critics and people who do essentially make a living destroying work like that's all. It's such a strange idea that is an industry.
I know
that you can get paid to just belittle someone else's creation.
I know, which doesn't make sense to me ever, because it's so subjective. I don't understand how you can like, I get it, like maybe you're a little bit more tuned to grammar and like certain character development and stuff, and like fine, I think that those are strengths people have to develop, but in terms of like just like general story choice and structure and messaging and stuff, I just don't understand how you can claim that a book is poor when other people might like that. Like I just, some people like only gore, some people like only morality, and some people like anything in between. Like you can't, I just don't think it's fair to like put a tag on something being good or bad just because maybe your preference isn't for that type. So like I know when I do my reviews, because I love doing reviews and I love reading like different works, whether it's like indie or traditional published. I never try to say a book is good or bad. I try to like present facts more so. I'll go, okay, I know readers like maybe a good character development, maybe a certain storyline, whatnot. I'll say like, my preference wasn't met with this, but this is what it is, and you might have a different, so like I don't discourage you from buying the book. I'll never discourage anyone from buying a book. I'll just present like the different facts of like things that might be a turn on or a turn off, and then let people make that decision.
Just give them the information and let them roll. The thing which always fascinates me about kind of professional critics as well is I don't understand who reads them. Because it's like you're almost looking to be convinced to why you shouldn't do something, like a film review or anything. It's like, okay, so I want to go see this film. I should probably read what's wrong with it before I even get there. There seems to, it just seemed like imagination just disappeared at some point from general audiences.
Yeah.
And we need that.
I think I don't really like ever read a review before I start a book. I think I'll read it because I do read reviews, but I will read the book first, and then afterwards I'll kind of be curious on different people's perspective, and then sometimes I'll even fight like 1-star reviews on certain books, like in my review. So like I remember Stephen King's The Institute I read and I reviewed, and people were like 1 and 2 starring, and part of the reason why was because he like brought his political thoughts too much into the book, and I like literally fought that notion in my review, because I was like, he's a person, and your art is reflective of who you are as a person. And I'm like, if you are so bothered by like 3 sentences where he mentions something, like you should not be I don't know, not to be like someone shouldn't be reviewing, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's just, so yeah, I'll read reviews because I want to go in with like a fresh mindset, and I don't want to be like biased one way or another because of a review. So I'll only read reviews typically after I finish a book, and then I might fight a few people, but
get into that spirit of protecting various writers. I think that there's a couple of kind of things there which just like jump to mind. That the whole idea of like Stephen King obviously has been writing forever, and also is probably one of those prolific writers ever, because his hands are just constantly typing apparently. But I never understood how kind of like people look at someone who's been going for such a long bandwidth and don't expect them to change what they're doing in any way, shape, or form. And it comes to everything, and that fascinates me. It's like, all right, cool. So the band you liked matured, or adjusted their style slightly, or the writer you like started writing about other things. Like, yeah, because they've been going for like 20 years. How are you How do you not
They're
do
like
that?
people forget that like creators are evolving humans as
Yeah.
well. Like it's not, we're not just like a stagnant piece of art that's just going to repeat itself. And the thing is like there's always two sides to the coin, right? So you got like some people that are like, why is this changing? I like the artwork the way it was. But then you'll have other people that are being like, this is getting dusty and like old and like, let's refresh it with something new. And so you're never going to please everyone, but there's definitely like two sides to that concept where some people want it to stay the same. And then some people are like, we want to go on this journey with you and we want you to change. So, I mean, in the end, like just fucking do what you want. You know, sorry, I don't know if I can curse on this. By the
You can swear all you want. There's no rules on this podcast. The only rules I have is you can't and I always forget the word. I'm going to say besmirch because I wrote it down earlier, but that's completely the wrong word. You can't besmirch anybody without proof. But I don't think that's the word. But
slander.
Slander.
Like, yeah.
There we go. See, I'm not a wordy person.
Okay.
You know, if I could have said it with an image, I could have said it with an image. But yeah, no, I don't tend to do everything. We're very, very relaxed, like yelling at concrete. But you did just remind me as well, with you mentioning kind of reviews and not wanting to spoil anything. I know quite a few friends who don't watch film trailers at all because of how they spoil things. But it reminded me of, I'm kind of curious on what your view is on book trailers.
Do you mean like those stitched like short videos that give moods, or do you mean like a synopsis, or how so?
Well, so every so often, because I'm not hugely into TV, but every so often you'll see on TV or you'll see on YouTube that someone will try to advertise a book, and the way they'll do it is by having stand-in actors perform like dramatic scenes from the book, and they'll throw like themes over it, and there'll be a voiceover, and I'm just watching it, like, dying inside because I don't understand how someone could do that to a book.
I've actually seen that with only one person that I follow on Instagram, and that person also did book cons and would have on top of all their books like on pretty display like a small TV that had like a consistent running of like the different books. I think it's actually a good medium. I think certain people like more visual aspects and can consume like maybe a synopsis better if it's visually presented to them, and then someone that maybe isn't as into reading might be more likely to buy your book because of that. I don't know. I don't know if I would try it myself, but I know that a lot of people also like to like turn things into like visual art, like from characters and whatnot.
I don't know. I feel like books are a hard thing to market.
They are.
And that's like a crux of it, right? Like, it's just a hard thing to get, especially someone who doesn't read books, bringing them a book to say, this is a thing you should read.
Yeah.
Is that a struggle?
I think in like terms of the whole like visual aspect, like it's easier to like quick dose someone with a mood through like a visual means. So like I know that like TikTok is blowing up for writers and readers and stuff because in like 45 seconds someone can be like, do you like this vibe? And they'll put like a dark castle and like a pretty like just overlapping like cool imagery, and then put an interesting song that kind of matches the mood. And people like, you can incite an emotion through that very quickly in like 30 seconds, and then maybe get someone to like want to buy the book, as compared to like getting someone to like read a synopsis might not always be like an in the moment sort of thing. It's not like as quick to digest. So I do think it's like an interesting method, and I'm actually like trying to figure out that whole like TikTok side right now as like a different means of marketing.
TikTok scares me. Like,
I know it scares me too,
but
yeah, it scares me too. But I'm like, I'd be stupid not to at least try, because like the reach on it's ridiculous. So
I mean, you're also young enough to be on TikTok. Like,
yeah, I guess. I don't know. I still feel old. I'm like going through this TikTok app, and I'm like, I like text my roommates that use it a lot, and I'm just like, how does this work? This is a scary place. Like, there's so many young people.
I think I downloaded it at one point, and I kind of flicked through, and I was like, and it was like back like a few years ago, or when it was just kind of coming out, and it was dominated by like 12-year-olds, but then it was dominated like by 12-year-olds who were into Nicki Minaj. So like, I'd open it up and I didn't have anyone to follow. So I was just getting whatever was on the front page. And I was like, I feel like I'll be arrested for having this on my phone. Like,
God.
so I'm just going to delete that and never go back. Never. That's just not for me.
I know, right? Yeah. I just like New York Times actually released an article recently that I've been talking with a few publishing friends about how like TikTok and now there's like how Bookstagram is Bookstagram. TikTok has Book Talk. And it's like this whole set. It's like basically the same idea as Bookstagram, just like with video memes. So and that's like blowing up. So that's another reason why I downloaded TikTok. I kind of sold my soul there. But yeah, through that, I don't know. It's something to try. I'm always interested in like new marketing means, but I think that's like a good method, especially for a age where we're kind of all like short attention span and like we want instant gratification. So it's like someone's scrolling and they see something eye catching. I might be able to catch a few more people to buy my book through that means. I think though, like my approach to it and what I like about Instagram is I can kind of just like show myself as a person and like interact with other people and be a part of a community and support other indie authors, which in turn is like very good karma for having other people support you. I think just like being, and that's why I'm saying it also takes a lot of courage because you have to like be able to put yourself out there and like talk to people and have an opinion on things and not be afraid to share that opinion in a nice way. I'm always like exuding kindness as much as I can. So, and then people, get invested in you because they like who you are as an individual and they're about what your message is. And then through that, that'll translate into like book sales and people reading and reviewing and wanting to like help support you, and word of mouth and them sharing with their friends. And it's kind of can become like exponential like that, which is a good thing. So it's just a matter of like handling yourself on a public aspect of other people watching you.
I'm curious now because I don't know why my brain just went there, but we're just that whole idea of essentially because you manufacture yourself kind of as semi celebrity. Like you have to have some comfort with people being that involved within your life in order to market in that way. And all I can think is the amount of writers who've used pseudonyms and false paths and false, livelihoods or whatever to present themselves as one thing. And I'm wondering if that's even possible nowadays or if that's more possible.
I think it's very possible. I think it would just require a different means, I guess, of marketing yourself, because if you're using a pen name, I'm assuming that you also don't want your face attached to that pen name. So you would just have to find different means that would all be solely like written to get other people to invest in you. So whether that's like an email newsletter and giving people incentives of like a free short story or I don't know what else you could do because I haven't ventured like into that solely. It would just be a different means. But the way I approach it is definitely not to like be that I'm vain, but for the sake of selling books, you kind of do have to present yourself like semi-celebrity and like never like in a I'm better than you sort of way. Like for anyone that like I think if you talk to anyone who has talked to me before, I would hope that they would all say like I'm very like approachable and I don't like at all think highly of myself, but I definitely do have to like for stories and posts and stuff. I mean, I'm giving my opinion on these reviews, right? So it's like I have to in some sense think that like people view me highly enough to care about my opinion on a book or how I promote a book and whatnot. So you do have to have that sort of mindset. And I think it's okay to have that mindset and still be like a very down to earth, like communicative person, but you do have to like have some belief in yourself as being like semi-celebrity. I mean, you're like selling stuff that you made, so it's
just not doing what I do, which is where you throw it into the void and just hope someone finds it on the way down. But no, I think that is a valuable kind of concept as well, of just that if you are promoting yourself and you're kind of branding yourself as whatever you're branding yourself as, you've got to maintain that open door policy in a sense. Like one of the reasons I kind of managed to contact you was just because you do have a fairly accessible way of contacting you. You reply to stories, you communicate with fans and audiences and things like that. And I thought that was not unusual, but it was unique in terms of what people previously do. If you were to set yourself up as an artist, as a writer, the old adage was, you set yourself up, you say, this is me, contact my agent.
Yeah, because I think of it more in like the content sphere solely. Like I don't think of it as like me as an individual person. I'm just like, okay, if I was a semi-celebrity, right? Like what would get people's attention. So I'll like post things from my normal life. I'll like make funny jokes. I'll whatever, like that sort of for content wise. But I'm like just as much an equal part of the community as like any other individual, right? So it's more so that like you have to think of yourself as a semi-celebrity solely for like, all right, what content should I curate that would make people interested? And like celebrities are what people are interested. I mean, like that, you know, you have to be popular to like, or have like popular, interesting content. So like I think of it from that aspect, but like never myself as an individual. I'm just like fun, cool gal. Like hit me up whenever.
I'm just curious, like, because we just talked about like the whole idea, and I'm just like, I'm wondering, like, is this you, like, off account? Are you like this, or is this all fake?
I know, right? You'll never know. Haha.
You know,
No, I
outside of
think,
this, are you wearing pastel? And is it like...
dude, right? Oh my god, no. You can look in my closet. It's just like all black, very me. No, I think I'm pretty authentic. I think it's just like I choose to share more about my life that I think is interesting than other people might, just because I'm like I want people to kind of like invest in who I am as a person, and like I think through that you'll get more interaction and whatnot. I don't know, and it's also just like fun to like the amount of stuff that I've just posted on my stories that are like goofy, and then like other people hit me up and like will be like, this is relatable, and like talk to me. And so I don't know, I love communicating with people too, and it's like such a fun community. Everyone's so nice, so it's like a good two-way street.
Do you ever worry about that kind of like that affecting your work, that you may like not necessarily start to pander to it, but you kind of might make things down the line which you wouldn't necessarily have made, you know, a couple of years before because you just weren't interested in that, but your audience is interested in that?
I don't think so, because I think I'm very good at maintaining that I'll only do stuff I'm like comfortable with and that I relate to, because I think that there's like a fine line between starting to cater to your audience and like losing who you are as a person, and then keeping like what your interests are and then showing people why your interests are interesting, which I think is important to maintain. So no, I don't, and no one that I've met has like ever made me feel like you should do this or do that, which is another great thing. I feel like society as a whole is just becoming like way kinder to creators, and like it's a lot less pressure, and it's more so, you know, do your thing, and like that, like if you're excited about what you're interested in, other people will follow. Yeah.
That's definitely, I think that's definitely a thing within society. Like that's, I don't think I've ever really thought about that, but the idea that society has become more accepting of niche creativity in quite a major way, you know. Like I don't know if you use Reddit, but
No.
it's like it's like a black hole of like random stuff. Like before this podcast, I was reading a whole post about there's a subreddit like dedicated to strong bones, like just having never broken a bone in your body. There's a whole
Oh my
subreddit.
God.
And
I've heard subreddit. I mean, Reddit being just like an insane, like if it exists or if the concept is there, like it's on Reddit.
It's just there, and I was just kind of reading through, but I've just sort of realized it's like, yeah, it is a really thing of like if you completely push your passion into something, regardless of what you're interested in, someone will notice that and go, actually, no, that person's really passionate. Like, I can get on board with that.
Yeah. And you're like exuding positivity in it. Like you're happy. Like that's another thing, is I feel like if you lose yourself in the process or overwhelm yourself, and this is like a really big rule, I think, for marketing that a lot of people fall into and it messes them up, is that you overdo how much, right? You overdo how much you're like, you overwork yourself. And if you're not doing something that you're enjoying, you're going to burn out. So like for me, I picked one medium. It was Instagram. I was like, I understand how this works. I'm going to get comfortable with it. I'm going to work it. I'm not going to do anything I don't like to do. I don't like to overly promote myself. I feel like I'm going to start feeling uncomfortable, and it's just like, it's not going to make me feel good. So that's why I added reviews to my thing. So like I'll do one review post, and then one just like life catch up, like asking questions to people like, hey, what's everyone working on or reading? And then this is what I'm doing. And then another review post. That's comfortable for me and that's fun. And because I've had fun with it, I'm a positive person, and people are very receptive to that and will want to like follow you just because you're like good vibes, right? So it's like, I think what a lot of people tend to do is that they'll pick a medium they don't like and then force themselves, or they'll pick too many to do at one time and they'll just overwhelm themselves. So I think, like, in terms of self-marketing, you really just have to find one method that you're comfortable and like have fun with it. Don't do something that you don't like because you think other people will like it, right? Like I don't even like I promote myself a good amount, like my books, I mean, a good amount on my Instagram. But like if you look, it's really only like I'll do it like a couple times on my stories, especially like on the week of release and stuff. And I will obviously on the week of release make a lot of posts about it. But afterwards, I kind of go silent about it. And then I'll go back into like reviewing other people's books and talking about other things. But like because people then follow me and see that I'm like having fun, they do the research on me themselves and they realize, oh, you have a book, I want to buy it because you're like an interactive, fun person. So I want to support. So I think, yeah, like just do what makes you happy. Have obviously like those marketing resources for people to be able to find that you have work out there that they can purchase, but like don't, make what you're doing miserable for yourself because you're going to burn out. You're not going to have fun. No one's going to want to participate.
It's like getting a free marketing course.
Yeah, all right.
I've learned so much. Yeah, it's kind of. I like the idea that you see it as like a positive thing, and that whole aspect of if you're having fun doing it, it makes it much easier to do, because I do know that that's a very true thing of creatives. If you stop enjoying it, it becomes work at that point, right? It just becomes that job. And I know I was reading an article earlier today, and I can't remember what it was on because I'm terrible at referencing source material. But it was that whole idea of creators now feel so much pressure to maintain, like you say, like a public profile, maintain an Instagram, maintain a Twitter feed, maintain a Facebook, that they do so much of that they just don't create.
Right.
They're too busy trying to be that brand rather than just going, actually, well, no, why did we start doing this in the first place? Why am I sat here typing when I'm just made 20 posts about nonsense?
Yeah. It's unfortunate like how many people do fall into that hole. And I think like Morality and Horror is a brand, and I've actually been loving when people like sometimes refer to me. They'll be like, it's Morality and Horror. And I'm like, oh, that's like kind of cool. I don't care if you like use Morality and Horror or Mona Kabbani, but it's just like nice. I don't think in my everyday postings, I'm like exuding like, what's the topic of Morality and Horror today? I'm just like, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and people get my message because they either ask me or they like read my work or articles or reviews or whatnot. But I don't try to like every day just because. And if you're like, this is what you like, there's nothing wrong with it. But just because I just don't like every day being like, this is what I'm about and you should buy my book. And, I don't like that self-promotion for myself. So I think people underestimate how much an audience will research into you and like do for you once they like you. So it's like, it's not a necessary thing to like every day be trying to like fill this gap that you think exists between you and your audience, that they don't have that information. Like, just do you. And like that, like if you're happy and excited about it, like the rest will come.
You're a very positive person.
I am. Yeah.
Like, not that I'm like I'm quite a negative person, but I come across as positive. But you're just very self-motivated and
for a nice horror writer, I know I get that. But
so
that's
the other thing, like but I was just thinking that the amount of horror people I meet who are positive, who are outwardly positive, who just have like a good mental balance of everything.
Yeah,
numerous. It's like a trope now for me.
Yeah, I watched this interview and I totally agree with it. Every single person on the planet of the earth, right, has like a dark emotion to them that, I think we all need to like vent once in a while and have like a healthy relationship with like negative emotions and dark thoughts and stuff. Everyone has them. I don't think there's anything taboo about it at all. Like it's just it's human existence is like that. And I think I was watching this interview. I forget. I'm bad with source material too, so don't worry. I forget who.
Neither of us is writing a paper with her.
I forget who the author and the interviewer was, but it's a good point and it's very true. Is that horror writers are typically happier, positive people because their job is like kind of expelling their own negative emotions in their art. So it's like a very cathartic form of therapy to like be able to pick like a storyline that you're like related to, or characters that you can relate to or whatnot, and then kind of face those emotions and like deal with them through your art medium. And I've noticed too that a lot of like people that are into horror are very like happy, positive, contrary to popular belief. And I think it's just because like horror writers and horror reviewers, readers, whatever medium you consume horror in, you're just like more face to face with your dark thoughts than like others who like try to push it down. And I think you kind of like make peace with it in a sense through that.
Do you find that tends to surprise people then?
I think so. Dude, you're not the first person that's been like, what? Wait, like halfway through an interview being like, you're a little too happy.
Because I did a recent podcast, which I titled Comfort in Coffins. And it was because I'm very comfortable with the idea of death, and I always have been. And that has always confused people. It's just like, to me, it's just like, yeah, it's just a thing within things, you know, we deal with it. But like it, yeah, I'm kind of wondering about, you know, has that been your experience or just out in the wild?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that like I've just like processed because of horror and whatnot that just like don't scare me anymore, or they're not scare me. I mean, things still obviously scare me, but just don't give me as much existential dread just because I've like had the time to like consume and process and like have my own catharsis with it. Whereas maybe other people that don't come face to face a lot with it, like when presented, kind of panic and just have like those emotions that they don't vent or expel, or they think that they don't have them, so they push them down, and then, you know, it ends up like subconsciously coming through a different mean. But yeah,
I can definitely see that. I think that as well as like to kind of ring it all together, I think when you think of, or from my personal experience, if you think of kind of darker topics and things like horror and gore and all those kind of things, the people who tend to be more susceptible to those topics tend to prefer when you have someone who is accessible or is kind of making an icon or a brand of themselves. And there's a line from a song, and I can't remember what song it is, but just talks about how you tend to relate to people who present an image. You know, if someone's dresses up and they throw on makeup and go perform on a stage, you'll respond to that much quicker than you will just a standard band. Because you can't really learn anything about a band, but as soon as someone's gone, no, this is the character I am, I'll respond to that. So in like, there's like a subtle part of that, which is when you're on Instagram or when you're diving into people's feeds, you very much get into that idea of like, no, if I can look at them and I know their brand and I can relate to that person, I'll be more susceptible to consume whatever they're putting out.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, being angsty teenagers.
I think, right. I think there's also something to say for like, I think a lot of people in society are very afraid to like show their creative or like art more not mundane side of themselves, just because of like fear of not fitting in or being looked at or gawked at or whatnot. So I think there's something to say for like being goofy on social media and showing people that you can like kind of be a weird loser and like not like a loser, but you know, like just a dork and just like have fun with it and whatnot. Not everything has to be so like tense. Like I put like vampire things and then I'll just like talk or be stupid on stories and like people react to that and it's like fun. Whereas, you know, I feel like we just like all have this instilled fear of like not being accepted. And I think if you like show people that side of you without fear, it's like, you know, they can like they're very receptive to that, and it's like it's just nice.
I think it's inspiring as well. I think there's I don't know if you present it from that way, but whenever I kind of post stuff and people relate to things, the way I think of it is like, yeah, you know, this is what I wanted to see when I was, you know, 12, 13. This is the content which I'd have never got because it was the 90s and accessing content was impossible. But you kind of dive into that and you go, yeah, you know, this is, you're making stuff for yourself, but you're making stuff for your kind of your younger self. That makes sense.
Yeah. Like I think a lot about like 13-year-old or 12-year-old me, like looking at me now would probably be like, she's so cool. Whereas like when I was younger, it was like, if I did try to express myself and like how I wore clothes, what I read or was into, I would always be afraid of like those around me judging me. That's what that was the word I was looking for in this whole spiel, is like, I think we're like all very constantly afraid of like judgment.
Yeah.
Especially from society around us. It's another thing that I think society now, like, it's not only more accepting of those niche creators, but we're like much less judgmental and about like, hey, if that makes you happy, you do you, right? But like definitely when like I was 12 or whatnot, it was just like this constant fear of being judged, couldn't express self as much. So I think if like younger me looked at myself now, it would be like awe, because it's just like, hey, you like did what I was like too afraid because I was worried about what other people were thinking about. And I think a lot of people respond to that when you show that off in like a public aspect. And I think that's like another sense of that positivity like shining through, because it's just like, don't worry about people judging you, like be happy and do what you want to do, because other people will find happiness in that and will want to follow.
Yeah. I think as well, like when we talk about kind of younger audiences, it's kind of a strange one to kind of broach, especially within like horror communities, because I know people try to shield all these kids from a lot of horror content. But it's that thing of remembering that all of those things are amplified when you're much younger. You know, like you it takes time to get to where either one of us is at. Is, you know, it's never something which you hit 16 and all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, no, I figured out life. You know,
Right.
I can do whatever I want to do now.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even figure out myself until like 2 years ago. So it's just, you know, it's still a process.
Yeah. I don't think you're ever done growing as like a creator and an artist. I don't think you ever should kind of stop growing either. I think that's very much one of those things of, like we were saying at the very beginning of this, when I find when artists stagnate and when they start pandering to an audience or adjusting things based on, you know, what is profitable and what is there, that kind of dappers off. So when you've got something like you've built, being self-made, self-published, all those kinds of things, it's longer self-sustaining.
It's self-sustaining because you're not burning yourself out. I think that's like such a huge issue, is that burnout. And I think people don't realize that burnout doesn't only mean overwhelming yourself with too much work. It also means forcing yourself to do something you don't like to do. And that's going to burn you out like very quickly. So like make the content you want and like present yourself the way you want and dress and do whatever the hell you want, because in the end, like happiness is going to fuel you. So it doesn't make sense to like be miserable with what you're doing. You're not even going to be happy for what you're getting known for, which would be so unfortunate, you know?
Such a catch-22. Just like, I've been known for this. I hate it.
Right, exactly. So like, why would you want to put yourself in that position? And I'm really happy, especially in this community, to see everyone like their individual personalities like all shine through so uniquely. And it's like just so wondrous to see like no one's trying to fit this mold of being like, I'm super dark and gothic and moody and I'm like the typical horror person and blah blah. It's like, no, you can be like whoever. I mean, if that's who you are too, like absolutely okay. But I'm just saying, like, in terms of like trying to fit the mold of what you think a horror writer or a horror reviewer might be, like I'm glad to see that it's not existent, at least in like that horror bookstagram community. Everyone's like so individually unique and it's like really wondrous.
I do miss something from horror writers though, because my vision of horror writers goes way back, where it was complete theatrics and like, you know, sat in a dark room with a candle and some sort of blood like just like falling down in a waterfall or something like that. And I do miss that extent of horror writers, because like you say, you know, Instagram makes everything accessible, so there is a level of, you know, this is me as a person and all these kinds of things. And I kind of want someone to come out of nowhere with a book with no social media preference and just be like, oh yeah, here's my tome. Which I
know, but that would be full theatrics, because let me tell you, like horror writers are like people in the most mismatched colored like sweatpants and stuff, just like tweaking out, staring at their phone and computer like in broad daylight, like losing their mind. Like none of us are like, I mean maybe some, but none of us are like near a candle drinking a glass of wine because it looks like blood. It's just like, no, we're like, there's a Red Bull besides us, we're like, we can't focus. We're all like losing our mind collectively, like, you know.
I really want someone now who's like super gothic with like a skull goblet, but it's just full of Red Bull.
Oh my god!
It's like, oh, what's in the glass? I bet that's like bat blood. It's like, no. This is Red Bull, and I've got like chocolate covered coffee beans over there, and my feet are in like a massage bath because I've been sat here for 12 hours.
Right, I know. Yeah.
That's what we can build to. That's the future of morality horror, is just where you get gradually more theatrical as you go along. But
with like one element that's off. So it's just like,
there's actually, it's kind of like I'm going to get off topic because fuck it. But there's that whole idea of, I had a thought the other day of, it's amazing what you can include in horror or like violent content or anything dark, like, and you can get away with it. By which I mean, it's like, so if you have a knife or something bloody and you throw, a little cute cat emoji onto it, somehow that still works. Like,
Yeah.
that just makes the cat emoji more threatening. It doesn't make the knife less threatening. And that's all I can think of the day is like you can really, with as soon as something is registered as scary or something is registered as being threatening, you can just literally throw anything at it. And it never sticks.
I know. Horror has, I think that's like another thing, is horror has such a range. And like people refuse, like people outside of horror that don't consume it normally, like a lot of my friends and family, when I came out with the book, were like, I don't really like horror though. And I'd be like, but what do you think horror is? And they're like, isn't it like Saw? And I'm like, no, that's not. Like, there's such a range of horror that like people outside of horror just don't realize and like refuse to accept. And I'm like, no, just like read the book or try. Like, I think there's a horror genre for everyone out there. I think you can't just not like horror. I think that you just like don't realize all the different tiny niches about it. Like, there's grief horror, and that doesn't even have to have like, it's when it's more so about like the emotion of loss. But there's like, there doesn't have to be any sort of like blood or gore or anything about it. It's just like a character, let's say like one version of it would be like a character dive into someone that just like had a recent loss, and then kind of just like their journey like through like maybe like darker means than it might be like coming of age sort of story. And I'm just, not every single horror has to have blood and gore. Like the bell chime there was like one like nightmare escape scene, but most of it was just kind of like psychological horror. There's not like any blood or anything in it, but people process it as horror because A, it's labeled as horror, and B, because like the horror of that like psychological loss is like its own version of fear itself. So like, it's just, there's a horror out there for everyone, and I'm determined to make everyone realize that.
That's good though. It's such interesting though, because it's kind of, you like, were you mentioning when you mention horror to someone and they automatically go to Saw. Like, I would never class Saw as like a go-to horror. I don't think of it really as horror, like as a thing. I don't know why. Just just thinking of it now is like, yeah, to me
it's like comfort.
It is. It's like a thriller, but it's like it's horror-y because it's got like a little clown guy in it, missing feet. But yeah, I don't think, because when I think someone says horror to me, I think Dracula.
Right. Okay. See, but that's because you have like a different relationship with horror, and some people don't have one at all. And I've just noticed that for the people that haven't had any sort of exposure to horror itself, like, I mean, they're going to go to like the biggest marketed gore in their mind, which like is like the Saws and the Friday the 13th and all that, and they're going to be like, it's just absolute bloodshed. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a version of it, sure, but that's not the only thing that the genre has to offer.
No. It's
so much more
versatile label. You can throw out anything. And I do think you can throw horror, as long as you throw the horror label on something, it becomes scary. I was just trying to think of like wholesome things in my head, and all I could think was like, if you labeled the Brady Bunch as horror, automatically suddenly becomes very vindictive as a show. Or like Happy Days, it's a horror show.
Yeah. And even like Dracula, a lot of people, like, I don't view vampire things as scary, but because like the characters are a darker concept, it's still horror, but it's just like it's a different type of processed horror. Like, you don't have to like feel fear every time you're consuming horror. Sometimes it's just about like the aesthetic or the character or whatnot. So I don't know, I think there's like a slight misconception with people, like I said, that haven't had ever a relationship with horror, that it's just only meant to instill this immense fear of like your fingers being ripped off. And I'm like, that is only like a small percentage of the overall scape.
Yeah, that can happen in a romance novel, like,
right? I mean, some romance novels, fucking are creepy. Like, that's like horror in and of itself. I'm sorry, but
I mean, to be fair, some romance novels are creepy. And I think if anything in the last 2 years I've learned is that the amount of things which people consider romantic, which are just plain disturbing, is
take 50 Shades of Grey and move it into the horror section, and tell me people won't be like, this guy is like, view Christian Grey as an entirely different person.
There was that show, I think it's just called You.
Oh yeah. I haven't seen it, but I know that one.
But the amount of people who were like coming out like, oh no, this guy's so romantic, I wish I could be so, like, it's literally marketed to you as a stalker film. I
know. And there's, whatever, it's like a fantasy, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just like, you're not realizing what you're saying about like one genre and then romanticizing about another, and it's just like yeah, I don't know. That's like in and of itself its own version of horror. Like that's like stalker, creepy thriller horror. Like that's that one's supposed to make you feel anxiety. So it's just like, so you like horror. You're just not like properly realizing what that genre is really.
Which explains why it's so hard to market as it comes
Yeah,
to be.
I know.
But no, I think there's. I mean, we can bring this to some finishing points because we've been chatting for a good while. But what do you have going on future wise? Because I feel like this will be. I mean, we're in what we're in now. March. We're in March now.
March, yeah.
Just inside
March
of March.
27th.
But it'll be a couple of months down the line. So your book will have been out and about, being consumed by the lovely people on your Instagram.
Yeah. So for like marketing purposes, I have the Bell Chime out, which came out last September. That's a short novella, psychological. They're all psychological. And then March 13th, so this month I released Vanilla. Next, I'm actually going to try to venture a little bit. I've noticed that kind of the realm of writers are going into this hybrid mode of publishing that I like and I want to try. So hybrid means like you're doing both traditional and self-publishing. So you'll give some like book concepts to like a traditional publisher, but you also retain the right and freedom to publish your own work through like Amazon KDP or whatever you need. So I have 2 right now that I published through Amazon KDP. So those are both self-published. Tor Nightfire, which is like I like their content a lot. They're doing unagented submissions. So I'm starting to write a novella for that. And the submission deadline is, I think, June 22nd. So hopefully that is like a next step. We'll see how that goes. Otherwise, I'll probably take that story idea if it doesn't get picked up and then just self-publish it. And I'm hoping to have something else out by the end of this year. Yeah.
That sounds good. Sounds like solid plans. Meanwhile, I'll start writing horror Brady Bunch fan fiction.
Perfect. Oh my god, exactly. I'll read that.
Who wouldn't read that? Right?
Right?
You know, Brady Bunch. There's like I don't even change the story. I just add that it's a horror genre.
Just label it differently.
Yeah, just label it differently. Maybe like adjust the cover a little bit. I'd read the crap out of that.
Listen, there's a niche for everything. You'll get there.
Meanwhile, it's been lovely to speak to you.
Thank you for having me.
The show. Hopefully, people will go out and find your work, and I will obviously share links wherever this is posted for people to pick you up. But thank you for coming to talk to me today, Mona.
Thank you for having me.
We will remind people to go do whatever they want to do and not worry about other things.
Don't burn out. Don't let yourself burn out. If there's one takeaway, just like do what you want to do. Do not burn out. Do not let yourself burn out.
And on that note, we will talk to these guys later.
Yeah.